Welcome into No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I'm your host, Joe Zollo. This week, we are getting close to wrapping up our A Look Inside series. We are getting to the end of the list. We have the Bills, Lions, and Ravens this week. And lovely special guest, longtime friend, ESPN's Liz Loza joining the show. We have a bunch to talk about. NFL training camps have officially started, so there's plenty of news to actually talk to you about this week. Let's get into it. Welcome into No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host, Joe Zollo. As always, Joshua, Ryan, hello, gentlemen. How are we?
So good.
This is the best episode of last year, so happy to run it back this year.
Happy to run it back. I can finally be on it.
I was going to say, I'm actually a little upset that we have a really good guest and Joe was able to make the show because it really breaks a streak we've had going for a while now.
I do have an impressive streak of doing that. But Liz, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much. I am great. I have to say, what a rousing and uber masculine intro you guys have. Fantasy football, T-count, let's do it.
Easily the most masculine thing about this show.
Thank you. As the person who made it is literally bowing. Thank you. For those that don't know, the theme of the show is infidelity, and that is because that was talked about in the pre-show. So throughout the show, I want comments of the GOAT of infidelity, your greatest of all time of the infidels. I want to know. This could be from anyone here. This could be, hey, Dad, fuck you, first off, all right? Second, I'd like to see the comments.
Wait, did you say Dad?
Yeah, that's my dad.
That is our favorite.
No, that's my dad.
We are off the fucking
I thought he was
rails.
the greatest adulterer of all time, and you were just zinging him in the first 2 minutes, and I was like, wow, let's get some therapy for Joe. Heal that childhood trauma. Okay.
No, he just like shit-talking me. I put Antonio Brown at the top of the list, early contender. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, my God.
I am just...
So, guys, training camp's back. And real quick before we dive into anything, the Coach Speak season has begun. So this is Ryan's wet dream, essentially, is because that is all he listens to.
Yeah, everybody shot up about 20 points in my projections this week.
Yep.
Yes. CeeDee Lamb is officially holding out. Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, Alvin Kamara, Brandon Ayuk are all in camp and waiting on new deals. Amari Cooper's contract adjusted with $20 million guaranteed for this year, another $5 million in bonuses that can be earned. Mentioned it last week. We were worried if he didn't show up. Looks like he's going to be fine now.
So big, yeah.
Yep, going to be fine now. And Stafford's contract adjusted also to add more guarantees. No exact numbers, but no guaranteed money after this year, and he's signed through 2026. That will probably be changed in future seasons. The cap is crap, and they'll figure something out. So that is your list of NFL news. And we will dive right into the joke of the AFC East, the Buffalo Bills, because that is exactly what they are. As someone who had to watch them and watch Tom Brady go 31-3 against them over 20 years of football, they're a joke of a franchise. They lost to Mac Jones last year, and I'll leave it at that. They lost to Mac Jones last year. 11-6, same head coach Sean McDermott, same-ish offense. Brady retained as the OC. If you remember, Ken Dorsey was fired midseason, and then Joe Brady took over. Ken Dorsey was fired around the time they're about 6-6, and then Joe Brady kind of led them on that nice streak that pushed them into the playoffs late in the season. Projected starting offense. Obviously, Mitchell Trubisky is the quarterback one on the team in front of Josh Allen. Listen, nobody has a better nickname than Mitchell Trubisky. And just if you don't know it, go just look up Mitchell Trubisky tweet, and it'll be the first thing that pops up on Google. Josh Allen's the quarterback one. Trubisky's his backup. James Cook is the RB1, RB13 currently in ADP. Josh, I see two ADPs. Is this
If you read where it says projected starting offense,
I don't read.
You have underdog and then ESPN ADP. I'm trying to respect the fact that Liz works at ESPN.
I was going to say, so why are we even talking about underdog? So the ESPN ADP is RB14.
Underdog off. Nobody would.
Yeah, I could have.
Yeah, nobody would have noticed.
Honestly,
it's pretty close.
It is.
I was going to say, Liz, I wanted to ask you really quick. I'm still seeing, like, when you actually look at ADP on ESPN, it still shows Tom Brady as QB 31.
Because he's
like, I had to pull the ESPN ADP from Fantasy Pros.
Then you're not, that doesn't happen for me. You're like, not Google, just Google ESPN ADP and go to that link.
That's what I thought I was looking on the right spot. Maybe I wasn't, but.
Well, I mean, also, remember Randy Moss was retired for a season. He was like wide receiver 55. So, like, that could very well be a thing. Ray Davis, the rookie, RB50. Ty Johnson, RB88. And Frank Gore Jr., future NFL Hall of Famer Frank Gore Jr. Look out, baby. RB4. Keon Coleman is the wide receiver 1 on the roster in terms of ADP. I don't know if it'll shake out that way in terms of what he'll be running, but he's wide receiver 47. Curtis Samuel close behind at wide receiver 49. Khalil Shakir, the wide receiver 3 at 54. Chase Claypool, gross, 98. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 111. Dalton Kincaid, the tight end 5, and Dawson Knox is the tight end 32. Liz will start with the wide receiver 1, who is already the crowd favorite for media and everything. Ryan is infatuated with Keon Coleman. And honestly, how could you, as a Patriots fan, I want Keon Coleman to be good. He just seems down to earth and has no clue what's happening. How do we feel about him from a fantasy football perspective? He comes in presumably right now. He's competing with Dalton Kincaid for targets, and that really feels like that's who he's competing with, and that's it.
Well, I think that is a fair assessment, and James Cook, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fair assessment. But there's also a lot that has to happen and synergy that has to take place, and an offense that frankly needs to solidify because we just got a sampling and a moosh-boosh of it down the stretch over the last 8 weeks of the regular season last season. So I wanted to start there because you mentioned the Dorsey to Brady transition, and because the quarterback position is the most important in football, let's talk about Josh Allen and how his game changed over that transition. His pass attempts obviously went down. We were all frustrated, at least Stephon Diggs. Investors were frustrated with the commitment to the run over the pass. James Cook's investors obviously felt differently. I know we're going to talk about him a little bit later. But his pass attempts went down per game from 36 to 31, so not insignificant, but here's something that happened. His air yards per attempt went up from 7.9 to 8.5. Also pretty substantial. Unsurprisingly then, as did his number of attempts over 15 yards downfield. They went up from 21% to 24%. So when we think about a big armed quarterback like Josh Allen and we see those numbers shift, we're hoping that on the other side, there will be a true X receiver who can climb the ladder and win in contested situations. And that sounds a lot like Keon Coleman. We all know by now he played basketball. For who? Say it with me. Tom Izzo, right? So that says a lot about his skill set and where he shines. My biggest worry, though, about Coleman, and I feel like people don't want to talk about this as much because the volume argument always precedes it, is that he's not a great separator, right? And yes, his volume figures to be really robust with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis off the squad. I think he's probably going to see around 90 looks, maybe even more than that. But he's also going to be drawing top defensive attention. Last time I checked, the Dolphins had a pretty good defense. Rod Mayo, pretty good defensive-minded coach coming to New England as well. I wouldn't be surprised, therefore, if Coleman, particularly from an efficiency standpoint, had a slow start. I think he could flirt with 7 touchdowns. I like him as a top 50 wide receiver, and I think he's a fine 10th round investment, but I do have him behind Rome Odunze and Ladd McConkey in that second tier of rookie wide receivers.
I mean, that was the good. Ryan, how about Ryan? You answer because you love Keon Coleman.
No, Liz hit it perfectly on the nose. And this Keon Coleman goes back to the stereotype of you have to be patient with rookie wide receivers. I don't know how much I'm even going to draft Keon Coleman. I have a feeling I'll be picking him up off of so many waivers come week 4 because people are going to be impatient. They're going to drop him. And then I know what's coming later in the season. Keon Coleman is raw. Anybody who watched anything from him, Liz hit it again. He's a basketball player. There's still a lot of football learning, especially NFL football learning, to go on for him. There's going to be a lot of chemistry issues, but the long and short is he has a skill set that no one else on the Buffalo Bills has, and that's called 6'4". So I think it's going to, at least in the wide receiving core, that is. So I think it's going to work out well in the long run. But for the first month of the season, Keon Coleman, if he's on any of my teams, will certainly not find any starting lineups. It's unsurprisingly great analysis from Liz Loza.
I would like to add that Chase Claypool is 6'4", so.
And Dalton Kincaid is also 6'4".
I said wide receiving core. I started that joke before Chase Claypool signed, so now my whole joke is ruined.
Oh, that's fine. But Liz kind of leads me into the would you rather here, because Keon Coleman is in a mix of 4 rookie wide receivers currently.
Yeah.
Sitting in the mid to early 40s. And those rookies are flanked by Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cortland Sutton. So we'll go through. Liz, it's the hardest game on planet. It's called Would You Rather. Probably never played before in your life. I give you Keon Coleman. I give you another guy. You tell me who would you rather on your team. It's very hard. That's why I break it down for every guest on this show. No one had ever played it before we had invented this on the show. So I know you mentioned Odunze and McConkey, so we'll start there. I know you have Keon Coleman below them. Josh, Ryan, do you have Keon Coleman over Odunze or Ladd McConkey?
Yes, Odunze, no McConkey.
Okay.
I would take McConkey.
I have
over
Coleman over both.
Okay.
In my rankings.
We are fully all over the place here.
Yeah.
I'm a Ladd McConkey and Rome Odunze darling, so I am definitely on the Liz train on that one. It makes me feel really good that I'm on that train.
Yeah, there's definitely a right side of this argument. It's not the Josh and Ryan.
Yeah.
So.
And then we'll go to, and respectively, Odunze's 43, McConkey's 46, Keon Coleman currently is 45 right now on ESPN. Right above him, Xavier Worthy, fresh off his 60-yard practice touchdown. I can't emphasize practice hard enough that he caught that against a safety. But anyways, Liz, Xavier Worthy or Keon Coleman?
Keon Coleman.
Yes, I love that. Ryan?
Right next to each other for my rankings, but I'm clearly taking Coleman.
Josh?
Coleman very easily.
Wow. Isn't it great when there's just unity between everybody? Keon Coleman. Yeah. And then the two vets, we'll go to them. Jackson Smith-Njigba or Keon Coleman. Liz?
JSN.
Ryan?
JSN.
Josh?
JSN by a lot.
Yeah, JSN, easy. And then Cortland Sutton is very interesting. Liz? Do they not feel kind of like the same guy?
Well, if they're the same guy, they're in very different offenses and they're led by very different quarterbacks, right? So while we have the veteran and the savvy and the green option in Buffalo, I think I want a Josh Allen-led offense, and if that's going to be the tiebreaker, I have to go with Coleman.
Fair. Ryan?
Right now, I would go Sutton, but now there's holdout rumors, and I freak out about those. So right now it would be Sutton, but it may not be Sutton for long.
Josh?
Yeah, I'm with Ryan on that one. I like Sutton. We're all big Sutton guys here, but the offense definitely is worrisome. But the one thing I do know is that he doesn't have near the competition for targets that I think that Coleman will have in Buffalo, because I think that's really what they want to do, is spread the football around.
Liz makes so much sense by saying Josh Allen is the quarterback, and my Cortland Sutton tiny little SMU brain doesn't care. So Cortland Sutton, even with Bo Nix,
are we saying Josh Allen is that much better than Bo Nix?
Yes.
you could combine Bo Nix and Zach Wilson and multiply it by 10 in Josh
which may
Allen.
Be what the Denver Broncos are doing this
potentially. Season, so. It's truly that far off. But we'll go to who might lead the team in targets, weirdly enough, at the tight end position. Dalton Kincaid, tight end 5 currently. After it didn't feel like he should have jumped up that high in tight end rankings based off his rookie season. That's just my personal opinion. And he is kind of at the back end of what you would call the top tier of fantasy football tight ends. Is he worth the tight end 5 investment, which seems to be that death sentence of mid-range tight ends, Josh?
So I just finished up my projections after tweaking. He ended up as my tight end 2 And a lot of that is because there is not a defined wide receiver one on this team. He is the guy probably outside of James Cook that has the most rapport with Josh Allen. He garnered 91 targets last year and was completely underutilized. When you look at what he did at Utah, 13.2 yards per reception and 14 touchdowns in 3 years. He had 9.2 yards per reception and 2 touchdowns last year. There's no way that you can look at what he did in college and say that last year was the new norm for Dalton Kincaid. He's 6'4", 240. He runs predominantly out of the slot and out wide. He is a mismatch for defenses. They're going to spread the football around, and I 100% I'm fine with that because they don't have that, 8 target, 9, 10 target per game wide receiver like they had with Stephon Diggs this year. That's out the window now. Nobody between Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, James Cook, and Keon Coleman are going to command those level of targets. So even if you're providing, say, 6 targets a game for Dalton Kincaid, that puts him right on the doorstep of 100 targets for a season. If you get him over that 10 yards per reception number, which he should very easily do when you consider his size and speed and mismatches that he's likely to face, those are all numbers that you want to see from a tight end. Last year, there was one tight end that scored more than 10 touchdowns. Everybody else had 6 or less. The sky's the limit. If he gets 80 catches, 800 plus yards, those are top 3 tight end numbers right there. It's all right there in the writing. And he has a guy at Josh Allen at quarterback who is not afraid to throw the football and has multiple 4,000 plus yard seasons on his resume. Give me all the Dalton Kincaid at that price. I would much rather have him over Sam LaPorta, which we'll get to shortly.
Liz, anything on Kincaid?
Interestingly, I just I had an article just go live, my top 6 breakouts for the 2024 season, and Dalton Kincaid made the list as my top tight end ready to break out. I love him. Obviously, he was drafted to be the team's flex, right? He's a great weapon out of the slot. There were some questions at the top of the season with Dawson Knox also on the roster, but this was the stat that stuck out to me the most. Obviously, when Knox was sidelined, we saw Kincaid have a massive boost in the middle of the season, right? And yes, his oh my gosh, hold on. I'm like getting something's in my ear. I've like turned something on. Hold on.
Jeopardy music queuing.
I don't know what's going on. There's like
what's happening?
There we go.
I'll comment on it. So that middle of the season Liz is talking about is week 7 to week 10 pretty much. Is Kincaid 15, 17, 16, and 16. His biggest pop game was 10 for 81 against Cincy, and that was flanked by 2 5-reception games, each with a touchdown. So when Knox was out, he was the guy.
Right. Am I back on?
You're here.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I didn't go away. All right. So I looked at the routes run, though, because Kincaid – so, yes, his targets, Kincaid's did drop after Knox returned, but Kincaid's routes run remained static. They averaged out to about 26 per game, but Knox's dropped from 23 routes per game in weeks 1 to 7 to 10 per game from weeks 14 to 18. That means Joe Brady has anointed Kincaid as the pass-catching tight end. Then, of course, we add in the vacated targets by the exits of Davis and Diggs. And now I agree with Josh. He's flirting with triple digits potentially.
Yeah, I have him at, when I did my projections, I have him currently leading the Bills in targets with 111. And I have Coleman at 102. So, I mean, it's not like they're super far off. But again, like you look at just going back to college, like his yards per route run in college was 2.36. Last year with Buffalo was 1.5. They completely misutilized him last year. So I fully expect that to take a bump towards the positive this year. And especially when you factor in the positive touchdown regression, the sky's the limit for Dalton Kincaid.
Ryan, our resident tight end guy.
I like him. I'm not bumping him up to tight end 2. I certainly am not down on LaPorta like Josh apparently is. But once the top 5 guys are off the board, because I would still take Pitts over Kincaid. I'm going to believe in the talent of Kyle Pitts. He was Dalton Kincaid before Dalton Kincaid was. Once those guys are off the board, everybody kind of jumbles in. And I'm not going to be mad if I end up with Dalton Kincaid, but I'm not making him a priority.
Before we dive into the backfield question here, How we feel about Curtis Samuel? Liz, I'll start with you. He has been injury prone a lot of his career, but when he is healthy, he is a pretty good asset to teams. How do you feel he fits in to the Buffalo Bills offense?
Better in real life than fantasy. I think it's going to be mostly a volume issue and a consistency issue.
I think that's a resounding agree all around. I think that's how we all feel about Curtis Samuel, honestly.
I think Khalil Shakir could have done so much better things if Curtis Samuel wasn't on the team. So right now they're just going to eat into each other's work the entire time.
Well, fun fact, he won't be on the field for 8 to 10 games because he'll be hurt. So that's when your Khalil Shakir shares will skyrocket because that's Curtis Samuel's career.
The upside with Samuel is that he knows this offense. He was with Joe Brady in Carolina, and he had his best season, his best fantasy season, and really his best pro season in this offense. I believe he was wide receiver 25 that year. He offers a lot just from getting open in the slot, playing that sort of like, Debo light role where he can handle carries because he was a running back in college. Obviously, he's a little older now, so you probably don't want to throw him out there for 30-plus carries in a season, but he offers a lot of versatility to this offense. And Shakir is still kind of growing into his role. I mean, he was a 5th-round wide receiver, so there's obviously some development that still needs to take place, and Shakir's going into year 3. But like Brian said, I think those guys are really going to kind of, eat at each other, and their volume's just kind of static at that point. I think the targets are really going to be dispersed to Kincaid and Coleman when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
Ryan, to you real quick on James Cook, currently on the edge of being an RB1. He's currently RB14. It feels like he should be much better this season.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a volume play with the ADP RB12 last year being drafted as RB14. I start seeing these things and it just seems weird to me that like we're drafting him below even what he finished the year before. And with the loss of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, there's so many targets. They're not all going to naturally find their way to Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman. That's not how vacated targets work. You're going to see the players that Josh Allen are comfortable with seeing an increase in targets. We already saw Cook involved last year. I think we're going to see that grow this year. And for those that are worried about Ray Davis, Cook gave up 31 red zone touches to non-Josh Allen running backs last year. There's still plenty of work for Ray Davis to come in here and steal, and even Frank Gore Jr. to come in and steal, and James Cook to be volume-wise the same guy last year. We just need to see him score more touchdowns. He was still the RB12 last year with 2 rushing touchdowns. So I think his already involvement in the passing game. And then what I found very interesting, his first 4 games with Joe Brady, 24 points per game and was the RB4. His opportunity share increased 5% during that span. Joe Brady knows how to use this guy.
And Ray Davis will probably get those goal line. I think they wanted Damian Harris to be that guy before he got hurt.
Yeah.
Ray Davis is he's not taller. He's just thicker. He's a thick boy that will probably come in on the goal line. And also, Josh Allen's going to be that rushing threat inside the red zone anyway. So the rushing touchdowns for James Cook is not the worry. He should have plenty of work inside. I do
want to throw in before we move on. So many people watching on Twitter right now. If you guys want to click that link, jump over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I know Liz is a great guest. We always have great guests. We're live every Wednesday night. Hit the damn subscribe button, people.
Thank you, Ryan.
I have a question for you, Ryan. What would you project in terms of carries, expected carries per week for James Cook?
Per week? That's going to take some quick math for me. I have him at 236 on the season.
Forget your projections. Forget your stat sheets. Tell me how you watch enough of this game. You don't need to rely on your notes that heavily. I believe in you. Tell me how many carries per game you would. Are we talking 11 to 13, 12 to 15?
13 to 15.
Yeah. Well, the average 13.9 last year.
Yeah,
so that is a pretty safe guess.
I'm not worried about the volume. You have to be worried about the touchdowns. But what I'm expecting to see is more involvement in the passing game. I think Cook is a good enough pass catcher, and certainly the best pass catcher in their backfield right now, that we could start to see him approach 65, 75, even 85 targets with all these vacated targets right now.
Ray Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I have him even bumping up to 5 rushing touchdowns. He's a top 10 running back for me, and he was a fringe RB1 last year. So, the thing you love about James Cook is the efficiency, and when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen who can do what he can do with his legs, that always makes a running back's job easier. And that's exactly what's happening for James Cook, but he only had 2 rushing touchdowns last year. That's why everybody, I feel like, is just kind of down on him. But I mean, you give him double that, and it's a full-on RB1 season. So I'm all on board.
Best bets to wrap it up. I'm going to flip it and start at the bottom. Ryan, you have the Bills to score 1 rushing touchdown in every game. That's plus 7,000 on FanDuel.
It's interesting with these. I like it when I see these with teams that have run-first quarterbacks. I'm like, if any team can pull it off, it's the Bills. It's another team we're going to talk about on today's show. And so I was like, I like it for plus 7,500.
Sure. Josh, you have Keon Coleman to Offensive Rookie of the Year using ESPN Bet at plus 2,200.
That's how I hedged my bet on Dalton Kincaid as tight end too. Pick Keon Coleman to win Rookie of the Year.
Sure. And Liz, you're not taking this, but you want to talk about it. Josh Allen to record 750 plus rushing yards.
Yeah, I think I did not follow the rules when it came. I did for the rest of the show, but for this exercise, obviously I like to look at the lines as tools to inform for fantasy. And I really found it interesting that like 750 was the line because Josh Allen previous to last year had regularly eclipsed this line. And so I think it's just the knee jerk that everyone expects 750 rushing yards out of him. But that's about 100 yards too low for me. We do know, obviously, the front office wants to keep Allen safe, limit his exposure at the goal line, limit his exposure to those rushing situations. He does play like a man with his hair on fire, and sometimes that gets you hurt, as the team knows pretty well from 2 years ago. So I think even if he averaged 37 rushing yards per game for an entire season, which is what he managed on a per-game basis under Brady last year, he'd still be under 750. I just don't think we're going to see him get back to that, and I want fantasy managers to adjust their expectations accordingly.
I like it. I have him at 676 in my projection, so I'm all on the under there.
What I hate though is when I see bets like that I don't have the capability to bet the under somewhere to just double my money.
It's just a gimme. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really. Next up, going to Motown, the Detroit Lions, 12-5 last year, same coach, kneecaps Campbell, same offense, Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. Good for him for staying in Detroit and not taking a head coaching job because he knows he's got something good there. Jared Goff, quarterback 1. He's the QB 12, currently in ADP. Hendon Hooker, his backup at 44. RB1A, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's RB4. Monty, David Montgomery, RB18. Craig Reynolds and Sione Vaki both back him up. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 5. Jamison Williams, wide receiver 48. Drop down to Khalif Raymond at 92, and then even further down, DPJ Donovan Peoples-Jones at 131. And Sam LaPorta, depending on what site and where you're drafting him, he's either 1 or he's 2. He's currently tight end 2 on ESPN, but he has been tight end 1 for a very long time on a lot of other websites. Obviously, as you get more of the, we say the seasonal fantasy football players, the name brand of Travis Kelce will probably be the first one off the board, but LaPorta is very likely to be that second one off the board. We'll start in the backfield with Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I'm interested because I see Liz's bet, and I see her wanting to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, and I can't tell if this is going to be good or it's going to be bad. So do you like Jahmyr Gibbs where he's currently being drafted, or are you like, no, let's dial it back here?
Where is he being drafted? RB8. Yeah, that's where I have him ranked. Spoiler alert. But that doesn't mean we can't talk about him. And we can't talk about how both of these running backs complement each other and can coexist in this particular offense.
Yes.
Gibbs, what a rookie year, right? The 8th most efficient running back in fantasy last year. He averaged 5.4 yards per touch. He was, and I think this is the part that doesn't get spoken about, because we knew what potential he had as a pass catcher, but he was electric as a rusher. 56 evaded tackles, that's RB13, and 15 breakaway runs, that's RB3. By the way, if you don't know, breakaway runs is any run over 15 yards. That's the metric or the amount of the space that we're using. As a receiver, like I said, we expected good things given his production at Alabama, but he cleared 50 grabs, averaged 3.5 receptions per game, RB9. Clearly, he and David Montgomery can coexist in Ben Johnson's very run-friendly approach. But here's the thing. Again, there's no clear answers. Everything is complicated. Detroit got really good last year, which means their schedule is more difficult this year. I'm not sure Gibbs will have the same success as a rusher, but I do think he'll see more action in the passing game as that piece of his skill set continues to develop, and he is probably more regularly deployed, especially if games are a little bit closer than they were last year. So it's probably a wash. I don't think he greatly improves upon his rookie effort. He was the RB10 in PPR last year, so I have him ranked RB8 this year.
He's currently as a guy who loves taking running back round 1, round 2. He's the 16th overall pick right now on average on ESPN. So 10-team leagues, back half of the second, 12-team, middle of the second.
That's exactly what I wrote in my Gibbs article. I did a little hypothetical situation of what it would take for him to be the RB1, and kind of what Liz just said. I pumped up a lot of his stats in this very best case scenario hypothetical and still couldn't get him anywhere near what Christian McCaffrey did last year. Like, that's spoiler alert. The conclusion of my article is at best he's the RB2. But what I do love about the entire situation is I do think he's going to be more involved in the passing game. And Joe, what I mentioned in the article is if I'm picking 11, 12, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be on every fantasy team where I'm picking from that slot, plain and simple. He's one of my favorites. I'm higher on him than Liz. I actually have him up as the RB4 this season behind the big three. And so essentially once the big three running backs go and the 3 wide receivers I like go, he is from 7th pick on my number 1 pick.
So your big 3 being McCaffrey, Hall, and Bijan?
Yes.
Okay. You have him above Saquon?
Yes.
And Jonathan Taylor?
Yes.
That's bullish.
Well, that's, you say bullish, I say foolish. So there's
probably both right.
He's my RB10, so I'm lower than everybody.
I think that I like the 8, 7, 6. Fine, go 6. That's fine. But that's a tough one, Ryan.
I just think his ceiling is capped because of David Montgomery. Like, they're going to ride David Montgomery in those games when they get out ahead. It's going to be Montgomery, and Montgomery's going to have 13 to 15 touchdowns. That's the way this offense is set up. So I just don't really see Gibbs coming in and having this like 10-plus rushing touchdown upside, especially if everybody's so high on LaPorta, everybody's so high on Amon St. Brown. The coaching staff can't stop talking up Jamison Williams. How much more touchdowns are they going to score than what they did last year to really make this RB4 ADP to pay off? I just don't see it.
Well, they're going to score more because they have 14 indoor and retractable roof games this year. So Dome Jared.
You're basically saying they're going to be the best offense in the NFL at that point.
I probably have them projected
I think
as
it's
the best
possible.
offense.
I'm not saying it can't be, but it's also an offense that's run by Jared Goff. So
no, I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to say one thing, and then I'm going to say Josh's counterpoint before he throws it back into my face. Josh just said he doesn't see Jahmyr Gibbs being a 10-plus rushing touchdown guy. He scored 10 fucking rushing touchdowns his first season in the league. But what Josh is going to bring up
did he play
is that
from
David Montgomery
in place of David Montgomery.
David Montgomery missed 3 games, and Jahmyr Gibbs scored 70 fantasy points in those 3 games that David Montgomery missed. So
there you go.
That is interesting.
I just see Liz's face sitting back, and she just looks perplexed by every argument.
I'm not perplexed. I think the two of them, I think it is wonderful to have this back and forth so that viewers can decide which side of the argument they want to land on. I think it's also entirely likely that David Montgomery misses games, and it's also likely that Gibbs misses games, right? Like, there is a load,
and then
right?
Craig Reynolds, the true RB1, comes in and claims his rightful throne. Obviously, is what we're saying. What we're saying is draft Craig Reynolds in the 2nd round, and you'll be satisfied with your purchase. That's
I mean, Ryan, do you think that the Lions are going to improve upon their record next year? Like, here's a stat. Out of all of the teams that played, only one managed a passing touchdown in every single game last year. Jared Goff was one of, I think, 3 quarterbacks, and maybe Josh Allen was the other one, I forget the third, who missed that metric by 1. There was only one game in which he did not throw a passing touchdown. This means nothing, but the Denver Broncos were the only team, and they were absolute shite, right? That managed a passing touchdown in every single game. Yes,
What a trivia stat.
do we really think that Jared Goff, like, are we expecting that much of an improvement? Again, noting the changes not only within the division, the emergence of Jordan Love and Caleb Williams completely changing the complexion of Chicago's offense, like that this team is just going to be as dominant, or are there going to be moments where they're not going to be able to run as much because they're not going to be playing from such a big lead? Like, this is a team that invites close games under Ben Johnson's strategy.
Oh, 100%. I'm not projecting them to win many more games because they do have that first place schedule now, which is going to bog them down. What has me interested, I can guarantee you Jared Goff will not throw a touchdown in every game because he has outdoor games against Chicago and Green Bay. And so things are going to not go well in those two games. So that's where I would be betting against that all day. But I also think them losing games for fantasy is not the worst thing in the world. Them losing games is going to be more conducive to a good, healthy Jahmyr Gibbs season in the passing game than it's going to be for David Montgomery to chew the clock.
I guess my point to that, though, is like Jamison Williams is now like this deep threat. Like, don't you think if there's a Hail Mary situation, you're not just going to dink and dunk it to the running back, but you're going to actually utilize like your field stretcher?
Well, the Hail Mary situation, the last play of the game is the last play of the game. I'm not too worried about that. They still got to get up the field.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Fine.
I think Jameson Williams plays 7 games, and that's that. The coach speak for
he's
Jameson
gonna play
Williams
more than that
crazy.
unless he gets popped for gambling again. Let's be real.
Pop for gambling. His hamstring gives out. He, in his Alabama education, forget what a playbook is. All these different things. Look, I'm keeping it real. Jameson Williams is currently right now a bust. He is currently right now a bust, and that is trending in that same direction.
He was basically a rookie last year, though. Like that, like
bitch, he's in one of the best offenses. Get better. I don't know what to tell you. You have one of the best receivers, one of the best offensive threats out of the backfield, and last year the best fucking tight end. Get better. You're the 4th option as the fastest fucking guy on the team. Figure it out. Do something. You played at an NFL level school in the SEC at Alabama. What are we doing? Figure it the fuck out, dude. Figure it out. And he hasn't yet. He's immature, doesn't know what he's doing, and he's had drop issues before.
Like every wide receiver. Come on.
Bitch, Larry Fitzgerald. Like, not every receiver has drop issues. Like, no.
You named the one guy in all of NFL history that hasn't had drop issues.
Yeah, because that's the insane status. He has more tackles than drops in his career, and that's the greatest stat ever known to mankind in any sport. Jameson Williams is a pile of crap. And I mean that in the most loving way possible. I'm sure he's a great human. He's bad at his job, and that's what we're talking about here. He's bad at his job. That's all it is. I hope
he smashes this year just to throw it in your face.
He won't. I'm so fully confident that he doesn't. I'm so fully confident. And I hope this guy smashes in your face, Josh. Pause. Sam LaPorta. You currently don't like Sam LaPorta. Now, we always say it's not that we don't like a player. I don't like Jameson Williams as a player. But we don't like ADPs. That's normally the biggest thing we bring up. Is like the biggest one. We like Anthony Richardson as a player. And I say, well, I don't know Liz's stance on AR. But we don't like the quarterback 5 ADP. That feels
because you're cowards.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, yeah. Get us. Throw punches,
you're cowards.
Liz. Throw punches, Liz.
I mean, cool. You like finishing 6th in your league?
Yeah. Versus 11th with Anthony Richardson.
I'd rather finish 11th than 6th any day. I'd rather finish 11th.
That means you won the toilet bowl. That means you won and forced somebody else to do the punishment.
12th did. I didn't finish 12th. I finished 11th.
That's what I'm saying. You won the toilet bowl.
You won it.
So you caused that person pain. So I guess that's fair.
I won the toilet bowl. Yes. I understand what you're saying.
Point. Yes. So LaPorta we're here. We're driving like Watkins Glen right now. It's not a full circle like a NASCAR track. Sam LaPorta, why don't you like him considering he's the second option down the field currently in the passing game?
Well, that's the thing. He's not going downfield. He's 10.3 yards per reception. That's not downfield. His ADOT is...
Sounds like a first down to me.
It was 8. his ADOT was 8 last year. Like but when you look at the top tight ends, they're getting 11, 12, 13 yards down the field. That's what's going on. My thing with Sam LaPorta, it's the ADP. You are literally drafting him at his ceiling. I mentioned earlier, he led all tight ends with 10 touchdowns. There wasn't a single tight end that scored 7, 8, or 9 touchdowns. Everybody was at 6. You take 4 touchdowns off, and he's right in the middle of the pack. He's tight end 5. He was tight end 1 in overall points. He was not tight end 1 in fantasy points per game. He was tight end 3. And he did not lead in any major tight end stat. He was 5th in targets, 4th in receptions, 5th in yards, 6th in yards per route run, 3rd in fantasy points per game, as I mentioned. There's just, for me, when I'm looking at touchdown scoring, I want to see some level of his history that says, hey, this guy consistently can score 10 plus touchdowns, right? We see it with guys like Derrick Henry. Even Travis Kelce has these ebbs and flows where it's like one year he's at 10 or 12. The next year he's at like 5 or 6. There's a lot of back and forth there. So when you're drafting him at tight end 1, tight end 2, you're saying that either his receptions or his yards are going to spike or the touchdowns are going to remain the same. You can't convince me on the touchdowns. Right now, I'm not sold on the receptions or the yards either because, as I mentioned, people are so high on Jahmyr Gibbs. If Jahmyr Gibbs is RB4, guess what? His receiving likely takes an uptick, right? If Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to be wide receiver 5, wide receiver 3, 4, 2, whatever it may be, some people think he might be the wide receiver 1 this year. That's going to knock down potential volume for Sam LaPorta. And then, like I mentioned earlier, all the coach speak around Jameson Williams, they're going to get him more involved, even if they have to force him targets. So either those are completed targets or they're missed opportunities. Those are missed opportunities then for Sam LaPorta. That lessens the likelihood that he finishes in the top 2 again. That's why I'm down on LaPorta. We're drafting him in a ceiling, and that's not what I want to do with a tight end.
Liz or Ryan?
I actually think this is an excellent point, and I agree that he's being drafted at peak value. Quick stat that I just looked up, Jared Goff, in terms of percentage of looks to a particular position, 57.5% to the wide receiver position, that's QB 19, 24%, 23.9% to the tight end, QB 9, to running back, 18.3, QB 13. So a pretty clear distinction of the distribution there. And I think you're right. If he's barely inside the top 10 in terms of targets to the tight end position, that seems like a full amount, right? It has hit its ceiling. So, and touchdowns are fluky. So
and over the last 2 years, only 2 tight ends have actually topped 1,000 yards, which is actually on the lower end over the last 10 years. We've had multiple 1,000-yard seasons, give or take, for the last 8 to 10 years. But the last 2, it's been 1 each season, which I find very interesting, to be quite honest.
And I'll add something that Ryan has always said because he's been Mr. Travis Kelce the last 2 to 3 years. The reason you drafted Kelce in the back end of the first round or the top of the second was positional advantage because he would score 100 more points than every other tight end.
You don't get that with Sam LaPorta.
You don't even get that with Travis Kelce anymore based off last year. So at this point, you're going to have people that are overdrafting tight ends, such as LaPorta and Kelce, just the 2 aforementioned, that maybe have 20 more points than the next closest guy, whereas your RB, for some people, RB1, for some people, RB2 or wide receiver 2, or hell, even wide receiver 1. That guy you draft there is probably going to have 50 to 75 points more than the tight end that you draft there. And there's odds that the guy you draft 2 rounds later still scores more points than that tight end.
Yeah, that's the game people forget to play is look at the running back you can get in this round and the tight end you can get 2 rounds later, and then vice versa. And you're going to see that the running back in the late tight end are going to outscore the early tight end and the late running back. So don't overthink it. The positional advantage just doesn't seem to be there unless you're predicting a huge breakout. And I think positional advantage breakout, the only 2 players capable of it are probably Dalton Kincaid and Trey McBride, because they could be such a big part of their own offense where we could see something truly insane from them this year. But the thing is, you don't have to pay up for really either of those 2. Trey McBride's getting a little crazy, but then again, I've been seeing a lot of tight end premium leagues, so he may not be that bad in regular redraft.
Yeah, LaPorta is my tight end 6. So that's why I'm out on him on ADP.
It's fair. He's 4 for me. Like, I don't have him at 1 either.
It'll be very interesting. And the guy throwing on the football, Jared Goff, Ryan, you want to talk about, and I think you're going to bring up those 14 dome games.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just having fun with Jared Goff. 14 games in a dome. I went and looked up his stats of indoor games versus outdoor games. They're what you expect them to be. 4.5% more completion percentage, 40 yards more per game. But the craziest stat. So over the last 2 seasons, 23 games indoors, 11 games outdoors. So it's double. 10 touchdown passes in those 11 indoor games, 49 in those 23 outdoor games. The guy just finds the end zone when he's in fantasy-friendly confines. So the one thing I'll throw out there is there's a lot of regression talk because they threw 30 touchdowns last year and ARSB had 10 and Sam LaPorta had 10. I won't be surprised to see them stay at 30 just because of the schedule and the dome games. But Jameson Williams throws an interesting wrinkle into this. I don't hate him nearly as much as you. So I think he could be.
How many touchdowns do you have Jared Goff at this year, Ryan? Just curious.
Let's not talk about it. You don't want to know.
He probably has him at 40,
I want to know.
probably has him at 42 because he always overvalues.
32.
Okay.
I'm at 31. I think that's fair. So,
Liz,
I think that's fair.
thoughts on their passing game and how it'll look this year from Goff's standpoint?
No, I mean, I don't think anyone's really drafting him outside of super flex anyway. I was thinking 30 touchdowns, so I think we're all in the same.
Yeah, and I think what's crazy, such a good point, and it's how I ended my article, is you can't right now. Quarterback ADPs are weird. So Jared Goff is the QB 12, but his average draft possession is like the 8th or 9th round.
Hi, I'm raising my hand. He's QB 17. I am looking at the list right now on ESPN.
I was on Sleeper. He was 12 on Sleeper. But what's crazy is that's falling
17.
into the 8th or 9th round. Like, I wanted to call him a late round quarterback, but 8th round isn't late anymore. So I'm like, man, we are all just drafting quarterbacks way too early. But what I will say is, Liz said no one's drafting him. If I end up stuck, and so many of the mock drafts I've been doing for the shows recently, you can get Goff or insanely Dak Prescott as like the last quarterback off the board. And I'm like, what is wrong with people? So
hey, Jordan Love still currently quarterback 10 as
and
well.
Love's another one.
Yeah.
Love, Dak, and Goff. I will say my best ball exposure on Love, Dak, Goff, some combination of those is obscene. So
Love, Dak, Goff. Sounds like a good team name.
I feel like it has to be now.
Love, Dak, Goff. Beautiful. Best bets. Ryan, Jahmyr Gibbs score 5 rushing and 5 receiving touchdowns. That's plus 470 on FanDuel.
I think he underperformed as a receiver last year. I hope we see a bounce back.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Feels good. Josh, you have Jared Goff for the most regular season passing touchdowns at plus 1,400 on ESPN bet.
Indoor games, man. I'm telling you.
Indoor. And Liz, Mr. Montgomery over 775.5 total rushing yards. That's minus 115.
Feels like free money.
Yeah. That one's pretty easy. I mean, that's what happens when he had his most efficient year this past year, which is what happens when you actually run behind an offensive line that's effective and within an offense that knows what the hell it's doing. So I don't see this number dipping. And even if he did regress, he would still clear this line.
And now, still sticking on the East Coast, the Baltimore Ravens. 13-4 last year. Same head coach, John Harbaugh. Same offense. Todd Monken, he's the OC in his second season. Hopefully he learns to run the football in the playoffs this time and not rely on, quote, the greatest quarterback to ever live, end quote, John Harbaugh. That man said by the end of Lamar Jackson's career, he will be the greatest quarterback to ever live.
Hey,
I think he forgot other people who have lived before Lamar. Listen, I'm all for having faith in your guys. If Gerard Mayo came out today and told me Drake May's the next Tom Brady, I'd want him fired on the spot because that's not the case. Just be realistic with me. He came out and said Jacoby Brissett's the most pro-ready quarterback. One, thank you, Gerard. Couldn't figure that one out. Drake May hasn't taken a snap yet, but he was realistic about it. John, what are we doing, buddy? Like, that's too much. But anyways, Lamar's QB4. Josh Johnson, the NFL journeyman himself, is the backup right now in Baltimore. I love that. Derrick Henry, the new toy for the Baltimore Ravens, RB9. and a steep, and I mean steep drop-off to RB2, Keaton Mitchell, RB68. So for those of you, at least for this year, who had Keaton Mitchell in Dynasty, you may be waiting an extra year because I don't think he's surrendering many. I don't think Derrick Henry's surrendering many carries to Keaton Mitchell.
Plus, Mitchell had that late injury that people tend to forget about. He may not even be ready for the first couple weeks.
Rasheen Ali. I would have given you a million guesses, and nobody outside of Liz would have known the RB3 on the Baltimore Ravens. And Justice Hill still kicking around there at the bottom of the depth chart in Baltimore, RB77. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 25. Rashad Bateman, steep drop to wide receiver 75. Devontae Walker, 83. Nelson Aguilar, dog, 126. And Tylan Wallace, the punt return specialist. That's the guy. You remember the punt return against the Rams? That was Tylan Wallace.
Yeah.
Currently not being drafted. Mark Andrews, tight end 4, in his backup, who, if Mark Andrews ever leaves the field, is a very good asset in fantasy football. Isaiah Likely, tight end 22. And we will start with the new toy in the backfield with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. I think this was the dream scenario that pretty much everybody had conjured up when Derrick Henry said he was leaving Tennessee. I don't think anybody wanted Derrick Henry to go anywhere else outside of Baltimore because of their run-first mentality, the idea that Lamar Jackson will take attention away from him in the run game. Yes, he's older. RB9 is the back half of being an RB1. How do we feel on Derrick Henry, Liz?
I love that you mentioned this, and I feel like Henry, because of his volume of work, is a little bit like you can't just give him a minute, right? There's so much data here, but I do want to give him some kudos. He's averaged at least 12 fantasy points per game every single year since 2018. That, to me, kind of that's like such a wonderful stat to understand what you're dealing with. He's always evaded like he's the anomaly of the position, right? He's always evaded tackles. He's ripped off big games. More than 8% of his total runs went over 10 yards last year, still in that mess of a Titans offense at RB13. But it is worth noting that he's coming off of his fewest number of rushing yards per game, 68.6, since 2018. That average might have been low, but his total rushing attempts were sky high at 280. There is a clear correlation between volume and production, especially when you're looking at his age and the efficiency that has waned over the years. But he's going to Baltimore, right, Joe? Like, that's perfect. No problem. Maybe a little bit of a problem. Baltimore, yes. Yeah. Led the league in rush attempts, 541 last year, but Lamar Jackson carried the rock in 27% of those instances. Gus Edwards, Gus the Bus, he logged 198 carries, which accounted for 37% of the team's totes. That's 82 fewer carries than Henry, whose rushing opportunities, by the way, made up 63% of Tennessee's grand total of ground attempts in 2023. Obviously, Derrick Henry is not Gus Edwards. He is going to command a bigger part of the offense that Edwards, but he's not going to exceed or even match, in my estimation, his touches from a year ago. And while Jackson's prowess as a runner certainly opens up lanes for Henry, it's unlikely that those big runs that I talked about, that 8%, will be plentiful enough to thrust the 30-year-old into top 7 running back territory. So as long as we, again, manage our expectations, is he an RB1? Yes. Are you getting a copy and paste situation? No, you're not. Maybe he's a top 10 player, and you're going to be happy with that. But this is not, oh my God, King Henry 2.0.
And maybe Todd Monken blackballs him because he went to Alabama and Monken came from Georgia. So, there's a real low chance that happens, but it could. Who knows? I still can't believe the man's 6'3", 250 pounds.
He's a freak.
He's a freak in nature, but I think that's Liz's point is we're still stuck in that 2019 freak of nature Derrick Henry.
And he still is that, right? It's not that he's still an RB1, but the excitement over his landing spot did not properly correlate with what he should projectedly do this coming season.
Sure. And this to me is a really good would you rather game. So he's currently RB8 right now on ESPN. We're going to go 6, 7, 9, 10. I think this is very interesting. So 6 is Jahmyr Gibbs. Liz, Jahmyr Gibbs or Derrick Henry?
I think Derrick Henry.
Ooh, okay. Ryan.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
No. I take it back. Well,
You said you had him as your 8, right? RB8?
I know I have him as my 10. I wanted to double check. I have him as my 10. Gibbs is my 8. So, yes, I do take it back. I do take Gibbs.
Okay, Josh.
I'll take Gibbs. I have Gibbs at 10. I have Derrick Henry as my RB14.
Ooh, okay. I would also take Gibbs. Kieran Williams or Derrick Henry? Liz. This is a really good one, right?
This one is a good one.
This back end of the RB1. So after McCaffrey, Hall, Robinson, Barkley, Taylor, those are all very clearly your top 5. This 6 through 10 range is interesting.
I will admit to having faded Williams because I'm such a Corum stan. But I think over the top half of the season, that really won't come into play. So I will have to go Williams on balance, even if I don't like it.
Okay, Ryan.
I want to see more of the preseason from Williams just because on top of Corum, there's also a foot injury that they've been talking about. I think Derrick Henry is safer. I'll take Henry.
Josh.
I do agree that I think Derrick Henry is safer, but Derrick Henry typically struggles out of the gate in September. So, and I think what a lot of people are forgetting in Baltimore, they lost 3/5 of their starting offensive line from last year.
Yeah.
And so
and they
I
were
don't
good
know
pieces
that,
too.
Yeah, and I don't know that. I mean, look, we know that Derrick Henry is great, but his efficiency has dropped quite a bit the last 3 years. So you take away key offensive line pieces, it may not get that much better, even when you account for Lamar Jackson. I'm going to still lean Kieran because I think that he's going to be the guy there, even, whether Corum cuts into it or not. But they have a really good offensive line in Los Angeles with the Rams. So I think Kieran can maintain a lot of that efficiency.
For the purposes of the exercise, Kieran Williams, I wouldn't take either of these guys personally on my team, but for purposes of exercise, Kieran Williams. Isaiah Pacheco or Derrick Henry? Yes, I did just say Isaiah Pacheco. Liz?
Pacheco. He's my RB6. I'm in love with where to get him.
Ryan?
Pacheco.
Oh, God. Josh?
Yeah, Pacheco.
Oh.
That hurt
guys.
me to say. It really hurt me to say.
Guys. He runs with his eyes closed. I just can't. I can't be on board the Pacheco
I think that Patrick Mahomes is going to open up that downfield so much more this year, and that's just going to open up so much more for Pacheco.
That'll help him. I'll give you that. By principle, Derrick Henry. I can't with Isaiah Pacheco. I can't. I don't get it. If you want to, sure, you're probably right. In all honesty, I just can't. But Derrick Henry or Travis Etienne, the RB2 last year, I believe. Liz?
I have him back-to-back in my rankings. I'm going to go ETN by a hair.
Okay, Ryan.
I am very high on ETN, so it's ETN for me.
Josh.
Same. ETN is my RB7.
ETN was painful on my team last year, but he did.
Yeah, the tail end of the season did not help him at all.
Look, he had that sweet stretch of like 9 touchdowns in 4 weeks.
So this is what you do. You draft Travis Etienne. You let him eat for the first 2 months of the season, and then swing a trade to go get Derrick Henry for the downstretch.
Look at this.
That's how you win fantasy championships, people.
Look at this. We've learned. Beautiful. Okay. And we'll move into the receiver room. We'll go to Zay Flowers. Josh, wide receiver 25. Realistically, there's not another receiver competing with Zay Flowers for targets.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I was really like, after Ryan took Mark Andrews and Liz took Derrick Henry, I'm like, so do I talk about Lamar Jackson? Do I talk about Zay Flowers? I'm like, we all know what Lamar Jackson is.
I got to be honest.
Go ahead.
Same exact thing. After I saw Liz with Derrick Henry, I'm like, I don't want to talk about anyone else in this team. They are who we thought they were.
They're very appropriately priced. This team, I feel like, is very appropriately priced. Even when I look at my rankings, like I had Zay Flowers as wide receiver 22, so it's not that much different from where he's being drafted. The thing that I found really interesting was even when you look at like past Ravens offenses, taking Todd Monken out of the equation, the last few years with Lamar, it's been one wide receiver. It's been Mark Andrews, right? Hollywood Brown was that guy for a little bit. His best season came the year that I think it was 2020. And that was the year they had like 600 pass attempts because he had 146 targets. It was wide receiver 22 that year, and Lamar only played like 12 games. They're not going to throw the football that much. They have a strong running game. They go out and they get Derrick Henry because they're going to continue to pound the rock. And they're going to keep their pass attempts in that 28 to 30 and a half, 31 range, right? Like that's just kind of where they're going to live, which is going to kind of limit the opportunities. But the correlation, I think, when you bring in the Todd Monken system is that he typically has a wide receiver one that he targets. You know, when he was in Cleveland, when he was in Tampa Bay, that wide receiver one got fed 24 to 25% of the time. So I think that this could really be the year that you see Zay Flowers kind of take a step above Mark Andrews. He did out-target him on a per-game basis last year, but we know that Mark Andrews missed time, so those numbers can be a little bit more skewed. But I think Zay Flowers can top 7 targets a game. I have him about at 122 targets, but I still think that's, you know, it's a wide receiver too. Like that's basically what you're drafting him as. And I think he's appropriately priced. You just kind of want to see more touchdowns. And even for winning the MVP last year, Lamar with only 24 passing touchdowns, feels like he can still improve upon that. And he has topped it twice in his career.
Where Zay is currently at is wide receiver 24. And when I tell you he's behind Devonta Smith, it feels aggressive, but Devonta Smith is a full round ahead of him. They are 12 picks apart in average draft position. So there is a clear tier drop-off.
Yeah.
And also Zay Flowers is in the same conversation as Malik Neighbors right now, which, again, still doesn't feel right that Malik Neighbors is that high. And then it goes to Tank Dell, and Tank Dell is 8 picks behind Zay Flowers. So he's kind of just chilling by himself right now at 62, in between Devonta Smith at 50 and Tank Dell at 70, and this is overall draft position. Because then you go Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley, George Pickens, T. Higgins. They're all within 4. Those are the next 4 picks in the 70s right there. So Zay's kind of chilling by himself. So we go to the appropriately priced part of this team. You now go to Mark Andrews, Ryan, who is, you have to say, Lamar's number 1 target, whether that, you know, doesn't show up in the stat sheet. I'm sure Zay will have more targets than him, but his number 1 most reliable target. Mark Andrews is tight end 3 currently, and he's in between LaPorta, way far down from LaPorta, but then McBride backs him up about 9 picks later. Go ahead.
I'm seeing tight end 4. Where are you getting 3?
Tight end 3 on ESPN. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, what is does it show their overall? Because that's kind of the argument I'm going to make here.
The overall is 42 for Mark Andrews, and then it drops to 53 to Trey McBride.
On Fantasy Pros, they're showing 50, and there's not a ton to add here. You've kind of said it. Andrews is still likely the number 1 target, though, full target wise. I think we're just baking a lot into what happened last year with Andrews missing time and forgetting that he was a 150 target guy 2 seasons ago, 116 a season ago. Obviously, last year with the injuries didn't hit quite those numbers. But what is interesting in fantasy football right now is with the love of these young tight ends, Mark Andrews is all of a sudden a value in the 4th to 5th round, where it used to be Kelsey was the back end of the 1st, but you still had to pay a mid-second for Andrews. I think we see the tight end landscape kind of fall back into line a little bit this year, though not with Kelsey running away with anything. But I have Kelsey as my 1. I have Andrews as my 2. But the price disparity makes Andrews the far better value. And I just think it's odd that we're seeing that in fantasy right now, that one injury-prone season, or not even really injury-prone, but one injury-marred season has made Mark Andrews a value, and it's a value I'm going to take in quite a lot of fantasy drafts.
And we'll add, if you're really that worried about the injury with Mark Andrews, just take Isaiah Likely with your last pick.
Yeah,
and just
the only tight end handcuff in fantasy football history, I think.
Like truly, because you know the moment Mark Andrews gets hurt, Isaiah
people
Likely's
will spend their entire fab, especially this year. Likely fab got insane last year. Now that we've seen it, you will see 100% of fab blown on Isaiah Likely this year.
And to be fair, nobody, like, you're in a, let's just say it's a normal like 16, 17 round draft that most seasonal fantasy
You're
football
cutting that
players are
last
in.
guy anyway. If you're
cutting that, like that last guy you take is a shot in the dark. might as well handcuff that tight end with Isaiah Likely.
Don't even worry about even if you didn't take Mark Andrews, take Isaiah Likely, because if Mark Andrews gets hurt, you just have the best trade piece in the history of fantasy football. So.
That as well. You could also be the asshole of the league and take Isaiah Likely and not have Mark Andrews as the handcuff. That's Ryan, 100%.
Liz, I'm really curious where you land on these two pass catchers, Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, kind of like the target distribution. And
I have Zay Flowers as my wide receiver 24 and Mark Andrews as my tight end 3.
Okay.
So literally where they are currently being drafted on ESPN.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying. This team is really appropriately priced.
It's almost like she works for the network, guys.
I was going to say, it's almost like when you have a prominent voice of fantasy football who actually influences how people draft.
They line up perfectly.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that Zay is under... I appreciated hearing where he was relative to those other players, because I do feel like there is a not ready to believe it feeling surrounding him. And I don't know if it was because of like the frustration with the drops towards the end and the penalties, towards the end of the season. We always tend to remember what we saw last first. I don't think that that's it. I just think there's a reluctance to buy into. It's hard to negotiate that, yes, Todd Monken was brought in to improve the passing game, and yet still the Ravens led the league in rushing attempts, right? Yeah. So it's a hard thing for people to take charge of because it's so paradoxical. But I think Zay Flowers could be a breakout candidate. It's also, they're just so, the wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 is such a glut of options and players that you can make a pro or con argument for every single receiver between 20 and 40, frankly.
Mm-hmm. So those groupings, it's kind of funny looking at ADP right now. You have proven commodities, DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith, 21 through 23. Young, flashy, Zay Flowers, Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell. The ups and downs, Calvin Ridley, George Pickens, T. Higgins. Mm-hmm. And then old men, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin being on the younger end of the older side, but still more older vets. So it is interesting to see those little pairing of groupings there. And Zay Flowers very clearly in his group is the guy. I yes, agree. Tank Dell is fun, but he may be the fourth option in the offense, and he's coming off an injury, so that doesn't help.
It also kind of makes sense when you think about the mind of a seasonal fantasy player. The first group you mentioned, the young guys, they all have season-long breakout potential. The second group have week-long breakout potential. You're hoping for the big weeks. And then the old guys are just like slow and steady wins the race. So they're the more boring picks.
Well, again, Keenan Allen at wide receiver 30. What are we doing? Come on. This man is the
all
man's
day. All day.
Dog, wide receiver 1. Liz, what are your thoughts on Keenan Allen real quick?
They better be positive.
I don't know if you really want me to get into this.
Right, that's fine. That's fine. You can end it there. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
Liz, that was hilarious.
Massive Keenan Allen fans here. Huge.
He's talk about that after the show then.
Wonderful human. I just don't think that a 32-year-old slot receiver is going to be the Bears' savior.
In a new offense with a rookie quarterback.
Also, can we, this is the point. This is not statistically based. This is completely gut based. But Keenan Allen was like, deuces, I don't care about playing video games. I'm going to continue working and having my career. I'm not interested in developing a rapport with this kid who wears nail polish. I'm out. It's not what I don't get the buy-in. And Liz, so I'm not buying in.
Liz, I respect your opinion, but I think you're wrong here. And that's, you know what? That's a gut feeling. That's a gut feeling.
Yeah, that is totally fine.
I don't think we can call it a gut feeling, Joe. I think it's a heart feeling.
Dude, I've been riding Keenan Allen since since San Diego Chargers. I've been that's been my guy. So, but everything you're saying, so accurate. So incredibly accurate. I just don't care, and I will be drafting Keenan Allen.
We all have those players, Joe.
Wherever he ends up. Who is that player for you, Liz? Who's that guy? This
year it's been Isaiah Pacheco. We can continue to fight, right? I don't mind that he's extra.
Yeah.
I like it. Go out there, be extra, dance all day, score touchdowns. I don't care. In this offense, you know what? Score, dance all day to Taylor Swift, even better. I am here for all of it.
I just can't stand the running like he's trying to push his legs to the other side of the earth. That's the thing that, like, I don't know why.
It doesn't amuse you? I find it. I think it is so fun, though. It's like
it feels like I'm laughing at him, and I don't want to do that because he is a decent football player. It just feels kind of. It feels like
isn't
a
it?
marching band.
Can't you? I'm just going to ask you this year to look at it and try to appreciate such a player who is so inefficient in his movements, not at all economical.
You know what?
Whatever
you're going to say, I buy in because you said that. Because you said that, I buy in. You said he's
not economical.
Inefficient
in his movements.
He moves
inefficiently.
He does double the work of everybody else.
That's fine. I'll buy in.
He's doing it in an offense that is lit and absolutely efficient. So that paradox is art.
He's inefficient in an efficient offense. That is fine. I'll buy in now. That's the greatest description of Isaiah Pacheco I've ever heard. I'm now officially bought in. And what Liz is bought in on is Lamar Jackson over 650.5 rushing yards. That's minus 130 on ESPN bet. Why does that feel like a layup?
That's what I'm saying. Liz found the free money bets.
Yeah, that feels like a
layup.
Well,
because that was the assignment, you guys. You were like, find the best bets. And then I was like, oh, here they are. Like, I don't know.
You might be the only person that actually took bets literally. So thank you.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
He's cleared this line every single year of his career, including his rookie year. I mean, there's that. He's averaged over 9 carries per game every year of his career and at least 5.5 yards per carry every year since 2019, even if his rushing attempts went down to 8 carries per game, and he maintained the exact same level of efficiency but missed 2 contests, he'd still hit 660 rushing yards. So yeah, dame the over.
Yeah, this is the type of prop bet that you build parlays around. Like, take the layups and then build the parlays. And
you parlay it with your bet of Derrick Henry over 10.5 rushing touchdowns. Excuse me. I was going to say rushing yards, and that would have been the real layup there. But 10.5 rushing touchdowns, that's minus 110. Both on ESPN bet. You can go parlay those right now. And then, Ryan, you have the Ravens score 1 rushing touchdown in every game. And hell, throw that one in the parlay because that's plus 2,500.
I did just like the difference, and I understand the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry difference, but plus 7,000 from the Bills to plus 2,500 with the Ravens. So.
It is crazy. It is crazy. And that
it's the Derrick Henry effect. I mean, 6 straight years he's hit 10 or more touchdowns, right? And then you factor in Lamar's running. They don't have a running back that's going to score that level.
I will say, of all of the ridiculous bets I found for this segment, this one feels like the one I want to put the most money on, because with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, if there's a team is going to score a rushing touchdown in every game, it's the Baltimore Ravens.
I really feel like there's been a bad best bet out there to kind of even like the underdogs, not the ones where I told you guys to just go spend $10 at McDonald's and throw your food out the window because that would be a better use of your money.
Which one that was. You were so mad about that.
You said the dumb shit like the Broncos to allow the least amount of points in the NFL or something like that.
Yeah, it was that one.
Sure.
I'm happy with.
Liz, thank you for joining. Always appreciate you coming on, and I am sure your season will get hella fucking busy very soon. So where can everybody find you and everything you do?
You can follow me on social, both Instagram and X at LizLoza_FF. I would encourage you. I have an article coming out. I just released the top 6 breakouts article that went live on the .com, I think Tuesday or Wednesday. Is today Wednesday? It went live yesterday.
It is Wednesday.
And next week I have my favorite drum beat players coming out. It's a little bit early, I think, in training camp to have a drum beat article coming out, but time is of the essence, certainly in fantasy. So keep an eye out for that. And then, keep it locked on to ESPN for the rest of the season.
Whoop, whoop. Next week, the last A Look Inside series covering the Super Bowl teams, 49ers and Chiefs. And then we take a backseat for 4 straight weeks, hand it over to the women of fantasy football for the entire month of August, where we do our lovely jersey raffles, highlight women in the sports industry. I already know some of the raffles. Josh has told us they're going to be fantastic this year, as they always are. And still working with galvanize and Miss Laura Oakman, if I'm not mistaken. Very excited about that. For Josh, Liz, Ryan, myself, you can follow Club Fantasy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Club Fantasy FFL. The URL is clubfantasyffl.com. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football. We will see you next week.